Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, this week, the question might have been, who shuts off the Sewerage and Water Board's water when it doesn't pay its bills? In the face of controversy over its collections policies, an investigation revealed how much the beleaguered board owes from unsettled lawsuits. We also saw a catastrophic hurricane from the outside looking in as we were reminded about the power of storm surges. In New Orleans, we'll see if the new mayor and the police department are adjusting to one another. And in Kenner, the mayor learned about the power of the Nike swoosh. As summer ends, we will assess the impact of Formosan termites, and we will look at the latest in politics. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. Mike Perlstein, investigative reporter, WWL-TV Channel 4. Kurt Sprang, reporter and anchor, WGNO-TV Channel 26. And Mark Schleifstein, environmental reporter, NOLA.com, The Times-Picayune. We're going to go over to Mark first, and I know everybody's heart goes out to those folks in the Carolinas because they're weathering a pretty big storm, and storm surge really has come into play.
That's very true. Florence is already inland across southeastern North Carolina, and it's moving towards South Carolina now. And by Saturday, it will be still sitting right there on the coast, pushing water ashore. And storm surge levels of 11 feet or higher have already occurred. Some areas of coastal North Carolina and South Carolina in coastal areas, especially along rivers, they're subject to as much as 6 feet of surge. So that's a key problem with the storm surge. But the problem here is that you've got rainfall on top of that, and the rainfall amounts are really up there, getting close to what Harvey was. They're talking about 30 to 40 inches total with higher amounts, and they're probably wrong, because as of 1 o'clock this afternoon in Newport, North Carolina, they had 16 inches of rain already.
So you're wrong on the low side, you think? There might even be more than 30 or 40 inches?
There might be even more rain than that. And this storm is a threat not just for the coastal areas, but over the next week it's going to be moving inland and then north. And so the whole mid-Atlantic region is going to be under really a major rain threat.
We should mention that there are a lot of New Orleanians who, especially since Katrina, who've bought homes in North Carolina, especially on the mountainside and Cashiers and Nashville. And it seems like you're going to at least get a lot of rain.
Absolutely. And the problem is that the way this storm is set up, you've got the rainfall occurring over higher areas off the coast that is now coming down and meeting with that storm surge. And the storm is moving so slowly, you've got both of them working at once. So it's a real problem.
Mark, is there anything different about a storm that goes to the Atlantic coast as opposed to what we get, that by the time it gets here, it's been around, it's been to the Gulf of Mexico, it's been across the Caribbean, and then it comes up?
Well, this one actually had a long history, so it sort of did a similar sort of a thing as going through the Caribbean. But what we're also seeing with this storm is one of the potential effects of climate change, and that is that the warmer water that one sees along that little narrow band that is from Africa to the United States, and basically to the Gulf of Mexico, that's widened to the north. And this storm has taken advantage of that, both in terms that portion of it, plus the whole idea of the storm being so aggressive in the amount of rainfall it gets is because you've got warmer air and it holds more water. And that's caused this storm to widen. It's now 350, 400 miles across. It's
a big storm.
Big storm.
It was really a super powerful storm when it was out in the water.
Right.
It got up to a Category 5, did it not, briefly?
Yeah, it did. It did.
But as it came ashore, it did, in terms of the category, that dropped.
So, you know, the good thing is that it did slow down. This is one of the good things about it slowing down. So that helps it upwell water underneath it, which is cooler water coming in, and that sort of reduces the heat factor that allows it to cool off. But it also caused it to widen and become a bigger storm.
The cautionary tale for us is that this is a Category 1.
Right.
You know, when we looked at Katrina as Category 5, came on shore as a 3. But this kind of event, and we saw it with Harvey in Houston last year, doesn't have to be a high category to basically, dump a lot of rain and become catastrophic event.
That's exactly true, and the reality is that a storm like this is going to be overwhelming for several days in this local community along the coast, and then as it moves inland, we're going to see some significant flooding in inland areas that are not used to this kind of rainfall.
And to hear of it just lumbering so slowly and that it's going to just stay,
Right.
that really brings back memories of Isaac, because it just did not move on. But
Right.
these folks are also really having a problem. Well, in western Lake Pontchartrain, certainly the Laplace area, there was a serious water problem there with Isaac. But these folks are having problems from the rivers, also having the water pushed up and flowing over them.
Exactly, and the reality is that a lot of these people have not seen a storm like this because part of our problem in the United States is that the vast majority, more than 50% of our population now lives along coastlines, and they've not been there for long, and so they're not used to this kind of an event.
And you hear about the scientific community maybe pushing for maybe a different scale for hurricanes that you cannot measure on wind speed alone.
Right. Well, we now have 2 sets of warnings, and that's the thing that I've been pushing over the last couple of days, is for people to recognize that you've got this wind scale warning of where the hurricane's going to go, and that's the cone, but you also have the storm surge flooding warning, and that's it can be a completely different, and in this case, much wider area.
And once again, we see that people didn't heed the evacuation notices, some mandatory evacuation. Now they're having to be rescued, and we must note that Louisiana Cajun Navy is going to the rescue there.
It is.
They're
I
definitely
heard the
helping.
FEMA director interviewed this morning, and he pointed out that on a storm like this, even after it's gone, there's still a lot of casualties. There are people up on their roof trying to fix something who fall down. There are people who just go in the pothole. And he says there's also an increase in domestic violence during that time.
Right, and that's another real problem. One of the concerns that we had after Katrina was that people actually were dying as they were evacuating because of health problems and things like that.
Not to mention how long the electricity's out,
Right, yeah, just the
availability
discomfort,
of
yeah.
medicine, hospitals, all
And
adds
not
up.
being able to get around to get medical help. So, well, our hearts go out to them. We wish them all the best, because that storm's going to be around through the weekend, right? Moving
It's
up
going to
through the
be
Carolinas, South Carolina,
into next week.
Yeah. All right, Mark, thanks a lot. Over to Mike right now. Sewage and Water Board. Now, they're collecting on unpaid bills, turning off water, but they owe some people some money for a long time.
A long time, decades. The moratorium on collecting unpaid bills was 10 months, and a month ago they lifted that, August 1st, roughly. And despite pleas from the city council and even a resolution from the city council to sort out your billing problems, which continue to come in before you start cutting out people's water. Well, in the midst of that, I got some documents. Here's one of them, which is the list of plaintiffs who have successfully sued the Sewage and Water Board.
That's a long list.
Up to, as of August of this year, 227 different plaintiffs who are owed money from judgments and settlements in court owed to them by the Sewage and Water Board. A lot of auto accidents, but also flooding, contamination, home damage from construction. So some of these are 6-figure settlements that go back to the 1990s.
As you say, these are settlements or awards. This is what the Sewage and Water Board has been told they have to pay to the plaintiffs.
Yes, and in the case of settlements, which most of them are, that's the Sewage and Water Board agreeing that they are at fault and must pay this amount. But because it is a government agency, you can't seize their property. You can't force them to pay. As one person said in my story, you can't shut off their water.
Right, you can't. So what's the recourse then for these folks? They've been, some of them, I guess some of them have died waiting for their money.
That's
to come
right.
in.
That's another thing we were able to find is in some of the older cases, and it's listed in some of the Sewage and Water Board documents as unlocatable. Well, I was able to locate the fact that they are deceased, and that's why they can't locate them to pay off. That is also a reason why some names have dropped off of the list. The list changes. I was able to get the most recent copy, as well as some going back to 2012. So there's a little bit of movement on the list. Some people have agreed to collect 15 cents on the dollar or some small percentage of what they are owed. Others have died and not left heirs and are off the list for that reason. So what we don't see is any sort of method to pay this down. We saw that with the city council. We know the city of New Orleans, like Sewage and Water Board, is self-insured. They have a large backlog of settlements owed, and at a certain point, there have been bond issues to pay off chunks of that. And then last year, probably the wisest thing, since there's some regularity, is that the city council passed ordinance devoting $2 million a year to a fund to pay off settlements on a rolling basis. No such movement with the Sewage and Water Board. So some of the people on this list, one woman I spoke to, up in age, wonders if she will be alive to collect.
So with that list, are the payouts being made according to the number that you're at on that list? Is it going to number 1, number 2, number 3, or is it just random, sporadic payments?
There are so few who have left the list from the ones I saw from 2012, 2015, 17, and 18 that I don't think anyone's really leaving this list unless they agree to accept pennies on the dollar or they're deceased.
And so there were some recent settlements too,
right,
with property owners up in Uptown from all of the road work.
And that's going to be very interesting. Obviously, those are multi-million-dollar settlements to groups of plaintiffs, powerful attorneys, recently signed settlements. Who knows when they may get paid? And what we have not seen added to this list are all the people who flooded July 22nd and August 5th of last year. One of those groups is asking for a class action designation from the court.
Which could really run up in the
and
dollars.
that could dwarf what is this current list is $7.7 million. That does not take into account interest. So compound interest going back to the 90s, you can imagine this is well into the 10 million and higher with some of the most, the largest judgments and settlements yet to come.
All right, Mike, additional frustrations with the Sewage and Water Board. Thanks a lot, Mike. Over to Kurt right now and talk about frustrations. Some people are extremely frustrated with the mayor of Kenner for his ruling about don't purchase Nike products.
Well, I think if you called this play in the huddle, it'd be the Zonzinger right. Okay, that's what I think it would be. The Colin Kaepernick controversy goes from the sidelines to City Hall in Kenner. Mayor Zahn in Kenner did not like how Nike prominently featured Colin Kaepernick in its latest ad. He's the face of the campaign. It comes with a very cool slogan that we'll talk more about that in just a moment. But the mayor felt that Nike was getting political and bringing in a political figure, in essence, the former NFL quarterback. So he banned booster clubs that use the city's rec facilities from buying Nike products. The ban reads, under no circumstances will any Nike product with the Nike logo be purchased for use or delivery at any City of Kenner recreational facility. The mayor said that it was a political message and that these booster clubs get taxpayer money, and so he didn't want the taxpayer money to go to Nike so that they would, basically profit from this political message.
Booster clubs also purchase, though, with private dollars, too.
Well, I don't think any team these days, I mean, if you've got a kid who plays a sport, it's a hodgepodge of sources,
right,
for
parents,
everybody.
grandparents, aunts, uncles, etc.
But the backlash was fast and furious. The mayor of New Orleans released a statement saying that yes, the city's the New Orleans airport is in Kenner, but it's owned by New Orleans, so it would keep pushing New Orleans' values of being inclusive and of accepting all. So I guess that means you can still buy Nike stuff at the airport in New Orleans if you need some. I mean, that's the only thing that's the only difference there. But we had the ACLU, the Urban League, New Orleans City Council members, some other elected leaders, some churches. Everybody. A lot of people were against this.
So there's a lot of people who showed up to protest the
That,
other night.
I think, was the biggie on the whole thing. It was a very public
Including
display.
Saints players.
And it was at one of the public parks in Kenner, Susan Park, there's a rec center there. and hundreds, if not more than 1,000 people showed up wearing their Nike gear to protest the mayor's ban, and two prominent Saints players, big names, Teron Armstead and Cam Jordan, were there. And I believe Armstead made it a point of saying, hey, I live in Kenner, and I don't like this decision about how taxpayer money is going to be
So that prompted
used.
the mayor to do what?
Well, then midweek things turned around. The mayor called about a 4-minute press conference by my count, and he reversed the ban. And he said that after seeking the advice of the city attorney, that he did this. He said that the ban divided the city and painted it in a negative and unflattering light. Although he's always said through this whole thing that he supports Nike's message of inclusion, which is kind of a mixed message for saying I support it, but I'm not going to have taxpayer money go to the organization. So basically, Zahn said, we see where this is going, and we want it to stop.
Do you think he was stunned with the reaction? And also, I mean, it made national news.
It made national news, and a reporter at the press conference asked him, you know, you've consulted the city attorney to reverse this ban. Did you consult the city attorney before you created the ban? And that answer wasn't quite as clear.
So quickly, tell us, what is the slogan for
Well,
the
this is,
Nike?
I think, the beautiful thing of the whole thing, is believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything. And I think we've all learned that is very hard to do.
Hard week for the mayor of Kenner. Okay, thanks a lot, Kurt. Over to Errol right now. We are in a political season locally.
And I would like to believe that we're back to exciting Louisiana politics, but this isn't the year. This isn't going to be a big year in Louisiana politics. It's an off-year election year, and of course, all the congressional districts are contested, but not seriously. I mean, the incumbents are going to clearly win, and so there's no big congressional election. You know, our senators are elected every. It alternates, and neither of our senators is up this year. And so I was just looking to try to find a couple of interesting elections, at least to talk about. And one is, I guess, the Secretary of State's election. This is the election to fill Tom Shedler's seat, who resigned or is resigning because of a sexual harassment charge. And so this is going to be on the November 6th ballot. And what's interesting about this, these are the candidates. Kyle Ardoin is the acting Secretary of State. He was sort of like the number 2 guy under Shedler. There's a couple of state legislators, a guy named Rick Edmonds, who's from Baton Rouge, and Julie Stokes, who's from, speaking of Kenner, who had ran for Secretary of, or for State Treasurer last year and dropped out when she was diagnosed with cancer. She's come back, she's now cancer-free, and so she's running for this, and so there are 2 state representatives. One thing that's interesting about Edmonds' campaign, on the day that he signed up, he talked about, as everybody does, you know, being transparent and being inclusive, all those kind of things. But he said, we'd also build walls. I said, what? And what he was talking about was the Russians, okay? That, you know, let's make sure that all our data is secure, that outside sources don't get them. And so that's this is the first time I know in a Secretary of State race that that defending against the Russians has been an issue.
And also we should know that it is Thomas J. Kennedy. It's misspelled up there, but it is Thomas J.
Okay.
Kennedy. He was one of the. So let's go to the next race.
Okay, and then we have the Clerk of Civil District Court. This is a special runoff when Dale Atkinson was elected to a judgeship. What's interesting about this is that the assistant, Chelsea Richard Napoleon, is running. First of all, somebody named Napoleon. I think this is our first time that we have a chance with that. But also running in this was a surprise. Jared Brossett, who's the councilman for District D, who was just elected last November to that council seat, and all of a sudden he jumps into this race. And of course, by his name familiarity, not that the name Napoleon is not familiar, okay, you know, could have a good advantage. But it's a different kind of job. It's more of a clerical job. It's a lot easier than being a council member. And so it's going to be an interesting race.
Okay, so that's those on the ballot in November, and
It'll
there's some other
be
races
November,
too.
and if there's a runoff, it'll be this. Well, the clerk's not going to have a runoff, but I think certainly the Secretary of State will.
Okay, Eve, thanks a lot. Quickly over to Mike now, and Mayor Cantrell, NOPD, Chief Harrison, how are they adjusting to one another?
Well, there's always been a watch when Cantrell took office as to whether she would retain the Police Chief Michael Harrison. She didn't select him. Obviously, the crime statistics are not what anybody would want in New Orleans. And there have been very little, I guess, public displays with the two of them to be an indicator, but he is still very much kind of in a tryout phase with this administration from everything that we hear. There are obviously, we have yet to see any sort of major crime initiative or big announcement or joint announcement with the mayor and the police chief. Everyone keeps waiting for that. As you know, previous mayor, Mayor Landrieu, had all kinds of crime initiatives, and obviously the anti-violence, anti-shooting, NOLA for Life was the big one, and we keep hearing about people behind the scenes working for what would be Mayor Cantrell's big initiative. Obviously, the police department has to go hand in hand with any announcement like that. We've yet to see that. The one opportunity we did see, two things came back to back, and that was the massacre on Claiborne Avenue, 3 killed, 7 wounded. That was made national news. Unfortunately, that killing remains unsolved, and the police chief and mayor both spoke out about that. It was followed very shortly after with the first big joint NOPD announcement that included the mayor, which was a big drug roundup from undercover buys of street corner dealers, some 70 suspects rounded up, and that was announced as an example of what the police department is doing to be proactive.
And the consent decree, what's going on?
Okay, well, the consent decree, there really is no end in sight. We haven't seen the end game where, obviously some of the things that were required under the consent decree for the NOP to do continue to be checked off, but it turns out that, that has to be ultimately, approved by a federal judge after a certain period beyond actually, checking off the boxes to make sure these are sustainable reforms. And so that's a costly endeavor for the city. I know with financial troubles over at City Hall, the mayor would like to get out from under that. It also, interestingly enough, may be one of the things that keeps Harrison in that job, since he has shepherded the consent decree under his watch. Those who have worked closely with him don't want to see the captain of the ship change once they're that far down the river. So that may help him stay on.
Okay, that remains to be seen. Thanks a lot, Mike. Back over to Mark real quick now. Termites. Well, maybe it didn't seem like the season was maybe not that bad this past season, but you say not the case.
I'm not quite sure that's true. There were several significant swarms that occurred right at that time, April, May, when they normally occur.
Yeah, we're talking about the Formosan.
These are Formosan termites. And Formosan termites have pretty much taken over the region. So they haven't gone away. They're less seen in the French Quarter still because there was a significant program that was done under a federal grant to bait all of, and treat all of the buildings in the French Quarter. But that program has come to an end, and so individual landowners in the quarter have to pay their own freight for that program now, and I'm already seeing open holes in the sidewalks where the baits used to be. So that could be a concern. We learned we understood the threat of Formosan termites after Hurricane Katrina, and that led to some changes and some problems in how we dealt with debris, where we had to keep all of the debris in this area in landfills here because they wouldn't allow it to be shipped out of state. That's something that South Carolina, Charleston is going to be facing with this storm, and other areas in North Carolina that have Formosan termite infestations are also going to have to face as we come out of this major storm as well.
How are Formosans different? Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to go back to you're saying that Formosans are really the termites now. They've sort of overtaken what we call the subterranean.
Right. We still have the native subterranean termite, and there are some other smaller species that are out there. But Formosans have huge nests. They outcompete the natives, and they're everywhere. And it only takes two to tango for the Formosans.
That's what happens sometimes at night when you see them and they're swarming, then all of a sudden they disappear. What do their wings fall off or
Well,
something?
yeah, what happens is that they are flying to light. And it used to be they flew to the moon, and they only fly about 300 feet. But now they fly to people's homes because there are lights in the windows or whatever. And as soon as they get that 300 feet, about that far, the wings fall off, and then they look for a mate. And all you need is two.
So the treatment that we have now, it will thwart infestation?
Yeah, we have there are significant changes in the pesticides that are used to treat termites. There's been a move towards slow-acting chemicals that are taken by individual insects back to the queen and fed to her, and it will kill her, but it takes a month or two for that to occur.
So it's still wise to get your house treated?
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks a lot. Time to look ahead, guys.
On the October 6th ballot, there's going to be several constitutional amendment proposals. Most of them are routine, but the one that's going to be of the highest interest is the one about requiring a unanimous jury in criminal trials. So that'll be coming up then.
All right, Mike?
Yeah, we have a new Sewage and Water Board director, Ghassan Korban, comes from Milwaukee, started the day after Labor Day. And we've yet to really see him out on his own with any kind of announcements or state of the Sewage and Water Board as he has inherited it. It's still early in his tenure, but we look for him to step out so we can learn more about someone leading a pretty vital agency in the city.
Very vital, and also beset by problems, as not the least of which is paying off these lawsuits.
And he came down here in the midst of a storm that actually didn't end up
Right.
hitting us, Gordon,
Well.
but he was all hands on deck in case that became an emergency.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Gary?
United Healthcare recently hosted a fundraiser for its Children's Foundation at the Abita Brewery on the North Shore. They want to spread more information about this group. The foundation raises money for families with a sick kid to pay for things that insurance doesn't cover. Any insurance, not just United Healthcare, any insured. And the money raised locally stays locally. They want more people to get involved and donate. They want more people, more families affected to get involved and benefit from the money. And it's uhccf.org, uhccf.org.
Okay, great. Mark?
Well, we're not out of the hurricane season,
No, we're
obviously, and so we've got that storm named X, which is just a storm, and it's going into the Texas coast over the next day or so. It's not really a worry; it'll be a rain event, but Tropical Storm Isaac is still churning away in the Caribbean, and the forecasters really don't know what's going to happen to it. It seems to be moving towards an area where it might be able to grow a little bit more.
We don't want to hear that.
Keep tuned.
Okay, thanks a lot, guys, for being here. Thank you all for joining us, and we want to see you again next week for Informed Sources. Storm-free, we hope. Have a good evening.